Hey, this is Jennifer and Megan. We are two sisters from South Carolina on a mission to discover more about our British grandmother's life in London by reading, researching, and sharing her love letters she wrote to her American soldier sweetheart during World War II. Our grandmother Lucy was born and raised in London, England, and our grandfather Jimmy was born and raised in South Carolina. He was in the U.S. Army and was stationed near Salisbury when they first met. At some point, he visited London and he and Lucy met somewhere in Covent Garden. At the time of the first letter that we have, Lucy and Jimmy had met, fallen in love, gotten engaged, and were planning on getting married in London and then moving to South Carolina once the war was over. But before they were able to get married, Jimmy was shipped off to France. They thought he would be coming back to London sometime soon after leaving, but as we now know, that didn't happen. And from the moment they departed at the train station, it will be 2 years before they are reunited. And so this 2-year period that they were apart is what gave us these letters we are reading today. It's such a beautiful love story that we just have to share it. Also, it's taken a life of its own as we've made so many awesome discoveries along the way, and it has become an ongoing research project. So, if you're looking for an interesting, unique perspective on life, love, and London during World War II, then you've found the right place. We will take you through each letter and bring them to life as we have recently traveled to some of the exact places mentioned in these letters. Think of this as a historical love story come to life. So, grab your favorite beverage and blanket and prepare to dive in with us. This is the All My Love, Lucy podcast. Hey, and welcome back to the All My Love, Lucy podcast. We're so glad you're here with us for episode number 17.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining us and for all your love and support and just enjoying this journey.
It's been a great journey, yes.
Yeah.
So we've had so much fun and we've discovered so much and we are still discovering. And we have a great big surprise for you today. And we're looking forward to sharing that. But if you're a first-time listener, we do encourage you to go back to episode number 1 to start, because this is kind of like a series, even though you can jump in practically anywhere. But as we refer back to things, you'll just know what we're talking about, because it is in chronological order based on the letters. So it's best to start with episode number 1. Now, we usually have an uninterrupted reading of the letter at the end of each episode. And it's usually Lucy's letter at the end. But we're going to have a letter from someone else today. So this episode is super special. We told you last week. Well, I told you I had a huge surprise. I ended up telling Megan what it was. And she's really excited. So drum roll, please. But we found one of Jimmy's letters for during this time period. I was so excited. I was just reading through some of the letters and I came to his and I was like, wait a minute. His letters are not dated. So we organized them based on the date on the envelope. Well, apparently this envelope was with the wrong letter because the envelope said October of 1944. But this letter is him responding to one of her letters from letters we've already read so far. So not really sure how that happened, except for the fact that he never dated any of his actual letters. We were relying on the envelopes to kind of go by when they were written. So we could have more. I don't know. Need to go through and see. So we had talked about also my husband reading the letters for us, having a male voice, but he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. I know. He doesn't.
So good.
I know. He just didn't want to do it. So we tapped into AI to help us with this, to read Jimmy's letter in a male's voice. Now, I couldn't find a good old Southern voice. So we just had to kind of make do with one that was fairly, maybe kind of sounded, I don't know if it sounded like him, but here we go. So again, the letter is not dated,
but it is in response to her letter from June 29th, 1944, which was episode 6. And apparently she didn't receive this letter until sometime after July 13th, which would have been episode 10's letter. And then she's kind of responding to him in that episode. She's responding to this letter. So it's all over the place kind of, but it's during somewhere between June 29th and July 13th. So don't really know exactly. So here's the letter. We're going to take a moment and just let the AI read the letter for you, and then we'll be right back to discuss this a little bit with you.
Dearest darling, just a few lines to answer your letter I just received and was happy to hear from you. I am feeling fine and hope this finds my darling the same. The letter I got from you today was the one you sent my ring in. I think it is very pretty and is the most appreciated thing I ever had. I showed it to all of my buddies and they think it is very nice. I'm so sorry to hear that you don't get much rest now. I hope the flying bombs don't bother you too much. I hope you received the letters that I wrote telling you how much I appreciated the rose, because this is the third since then. Well, darling, as I haven't got much news, I will say good night, hoping to hear from you soon. With all my love, from your Jimmy.
So what did you think about that?
It was awesome.
It was awesome. It's incredible.
Yes.
It's incredible to have one of his letters this early, and when we didn't think we were going to have one for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I love how he talks about the ring and how much he appreciated it, and he showed it to all of his buddies.
Yeah, and how pretty it
was. So we hope you enjoyed that letter. And so also the rose that he's referring to that 100-year-old rose.
Yeah, that 100-year-old rose.
Yeah, was that episode 3, the red rose that she sent him?
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's talking about. And so I'll pop a picture up of that rose. But also, she asked Jimmy, I think in the last letter, was it, that she talked about, did you meet any French people? Did you learn any French?
Mm-hmm.
And so she asked what he was doing, if he'd met any people. And so an interesting story that I read when I was doing a little research in the book. This is like our guide here. Key to Command. Again, I'm showing you this. If you're a first-time listener, we refer to this book often because it's a detailed document of all that Jimmy was doing. And so I want to read this. I thought this was really a fun story in the middle of a lot of things they were having to do. Let me get to it. Okay. So she asked him what he was doing, if he met any French people, and like talking about the French culture and all that, you know. And so here on page 209 in this book, it says, at St. Martin de Senilly, if I'm saying that right, July 31st, 1944, the men made their first acquaintance with large quantities of the distinctive beverage which takes its name from the department of Calvados. Calvados, have you ever heard of Calvados?
Mm-mm.
Well, you need to learn what it is.
Okay.
Calvados is, you can talk to Joe about this. So we need Calvados. So Calvados is a brandy that's made from apples or pears that has an extremely high alcohol content.
Wow.
And so one of the guys says, his name's Riedlinger, if I'm saying that right. A quote from him said, he's telling a story about them getting this Calvados. He says, we were just getting ready to go leaving the area around Cherbourg when a Frenchman came by with a bottle of Calvados. Everybody had a drink of it, and that was pretty hot. So I got to looking this up about this Calvados because also we're going to be talking about D-Day here in a few minutes as well. And one of the articles that I was looking at mentions the Calvados. So there you go. Something new. So Calvados, like said in the book, is made mostly from apples with an allowance for a small amount of peri pears, which are small. But All the fruit used to make it must be grown in Normandy. And I guess this will be similar to Champagne, because isn't true champagne supposed to be made in Champagne? Isn't it?
I would think
Do you know?
so. I'm not sure though.
I'm not sure either. I'm not an expert on that, but it made me think of that, how I think true champagne is made over there in that area.
Okay.
So we can have like sparkling wine or things like that. But I think true champagne. Anyway, so this Calvados, the fruit used to make it must be grown in Normandy. And while other drinks like cognac have to meet strict requirements, such as containing at least 90% a certain type of grape, Calvados liquor is much more diverse, as producers can use over 300 different apple varieties. Again, as long as the fruit is grown in that area in Normandy.
Mm-hmm.
So, isn't that interesting?
That is very interesting. Yeah.
And they got to try it, and they started drinking some of it. So I thought that was a little fun fact about the French culture that they got to partake in. Mm-hmm. And so she was interested in that. So I don't know if you told her about it, but so also another thing that I wanted to talk about when we were talking about, she said, what exactly are you doing at this very moment? Mm-hmm. And that was a couple of letters ago, I think. And I said somewhere I had read about they were kind of in the middle of a breakout, but I couldn't really wrap my mind around what exactly was happening. And then I got a map, and I'm going to show this map that I got that Michael Godbout, the author of the book, he recommended that we get, that maps out everything, all the places they went. And I got the map, and at the top it says breakthrough during that time period. And so I reached out to Michael, and I'm so grateful and appreciate he responds to me every time and just is full of information. And so he told me explained what it all was, because I didn't know if breakout and breakthrough were the same thing, mm-hmm. or what the difference was, or what exactly. So I'm going to read what he detailed here, because I could never sum this up. I could never paraphrase or sum this up. He said it perfectly. So I'm going to explain what exactly was going on there. He said much of the fighting in Normandy took place in hedgerow country, or bocage. The bocage is a patchwork of farm fields within hedges. The hedges, which grow on the mounds of the rocks and debris, have grown for maybe hundreds of years and could be 8 to 10 feet high. The Germans used these fields as killing zones. They would hide in them and then shoot at the GIs as they entered. There were farm roads that would allow the farmers to get from one field to another. If the U.S. tanks tried to go over the hedges, that would expose the underside of the tank, which is the least armored portion. So the tankers finally developed a rhino-type device that welded on the front of the tank, which allowed them to break through the hedges. And you can see that. He said you can YouTube it and watch videos about that. But the breakout, he explained that, was when General Bradley initiated Operation Cobra, which was the concentrated bombing of the area around St. Lo that would allow the U.S. armor to break out of the bocage area into flat, unobstructed land where they could employ their tanks. And he said you can also Google Earth that and kind of see the patchwork of the hedges. So I'm going to try to put a picture up of that. So I thought that was very interesting. And thank you, Michael, for breaking that down for us like that and describing that. So I would have never been able to explain it so eloquently. So also in the book, it mentions the haystacks. As I was reading about all this, I've come across that. So
really?
Yeah. So this episode, we're coming to a close here, and we'll continue on next week. I didn't want to include another letter in this episode because I didn't want to make it extremely long. Because if we start on Lucy's letter now, one of her letters, then it's going to be another lengthy episode. So we'll do her letter next time. And also, today while we are recording, it is the day before Memorial Day. It's Memorial Day weekend here, a day on which those who died in active military services are remembered. Many Americans observe Memorial Day by visiting cemeteries or memorials, holding family gatherings, participating in parades and things like that. It also marks the official beginning of the summer season. So the summer season is upon us here. But most importantly, it is a time here to reflect and honor and mourn the U.S. military personnel who died while serving the U.S. Armed Forces. So we always want to, even in the midst of all of our activities here, we do want to remember the reason for the day and to reflect and honor and mourn the losses and the sacrifices. So if you have a family member, if you're watching and you have a family member or a friend who made that ultimate sacrifice serving this country, we want to take a moment to remember them and honor them. So, and thank them for their service. And in that same spirit, we'd like to again mention that June 6th, 2024, upcoming here very shortly, is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. We will be watching, again, I said it's in New Orleans last time. We will not be able to go there. Unless you want to hop on a plane and go.
I'm ready.
Let's go. Let's go to New Orleans. I would love to attend because there's actually, she said that they have around 10, maybe more veterans that are going to be in the procession there. So I would love to go, but maybe we can go another year. But this is the 80th anniversary. And so we do encourage you to reflect on this day as well. June 6th, mark your calendar and take a moment to think about everything that happened on that day. D-Day was one of the biggest and most significant military campaigns in history. It helped end World War II, and it's important to remember and reflect on all the sacrifices that were made. It's very important to remember that, and blows my mind to think about all that happened on D-Day on those beaches. So I'd like to read something that I read on the history.com website as I was researching about D-Day. And again, some things I just don't want to paraphrase. I want to read straight off because I could never put this into words. So on D-Day, German machine gunners mowed down hundreds of Allied soldiers before they ever got off the landing boats onto the Normandy beaches. But Eisenhower overwhelmed them with 160,000 assault troops, 12,000 aircraft, and 200,000 sailors manning 7,000 sea vessels. That's incredible, isn't it?
It really is.
But their losses were steep. The 8 assault divisions now ashore had suffered 12,000 killed. 12,000 killed, wounded and missing, with thousands more unaccounted for, and 8,230 of the total were Americans. 8,230.
Those numbers are unreal.
It is. So we definitely want to take a moment to reflect on that on June 6th. And this is a quote from a guy named Atkinson. He said, many were felled by 9.6 gram bullets moving at 2,000 to 4,000 feet per second. Such specks of steel could destroy a world cell by cell. And then it goes on to talk about the French. The French, 3,000 French civilians were killed in the invasion. It's terrible.
Yeah.
3,000 French civilians. Mostly by Allied bombs or shell fire. By then, the French had lost so much in the war that they had run out of medical supplies. Some injured citizens were reduced to disinfecting their wounds with Calvados. And that's what I was talking about, that we'd mention it again. So they used the Calvados, the local brandy that was fermented from apples, to disinfect their wounds because they didn't have any medical supplies. So that Calvados is significant in many parts and very well known. I'd never heard of it though, had you?
Mm-mm.
When the Allied soldiers marched inland from the beaches, the French cheered, and many of them gave the soldiers flowers, and they were sobbing with happiness. The German armies during World War II overran most of Europe and North Africa and much of the Western Soviet Union. They set up murderous police states everywhere they went, then hunted down and imprisoned millions. With gas chambers and firing squads, they killed 6 million Jewish people and millions more Poles, Russians, gays, disabled people, and other what they considered undesirable people to the Nazi regime, which sought to engineer a master Germanic race. It's like ethnic cleansing is what they were trying to do. It's hard to imagine. It's unfathomable. I can't. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this guy says it's hard to imagine what the consequences would have been back to D-Day. What my whole point is in reading this whole part of this off of history.com is this statement right here. It's hard to imagine what the consequences would have been had the Allies lost. Imagine if they'd lost and that regime took over the world. They were trying to conquer the world. You could make the argument that they saved the world. That sums it up. What they did on D-Day saved the world. And the days after, of course. So definitely want to take a moment to reflect on that. The 80th, it's been 80 years, and we want to take a moment to reflect on that important day.
Absolutely.
So that was heavy, but we really want to take a moment to talk about that. But let's move on to something a little less heavy. We have an upcoming interview this coming week. We're interviewing our cousin Mary from Australia. We love Mary. And she is going to be joining us on an episode soon. I'm not sure if it's going to be this coming week or the next week, but we're going to be interviewing her this week. I'm really excited about that. Mary's great. She's got a great personality. Y'all are going to love her. And her grandfather and Grandma Lucy were brother and sister. And so we did a DNA test, and that connected us to her and her family. And so that's been so fun and so great getting to know them. So make sure and stay tuned for that.
And if you don't want to miss any of our upcoming episodes, make sure you subscribe and follow us.
Yes.
Like, comment, share with your friends.
All the things.
All the things, yes.
You can also email us.
Mm-hmm. Our email is allmylovelucy@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you if you have any questions or,
anything. You just talk to us.
Yeah.
You want us to talk about things, or if something we've talked about, more about, and you want to comment or contribute, we would love that.
Yes, for
So
sure.
just join in the conversation. We'd love it. So thank y'all for joining us. This is the end. We're not going to have an uninterrupted reading of the letter because we've already done that. So we hope y'all have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We truly hope you enjoyed this episode, and we hope you'll return for the next episode of the All My Love Lucy podcast.